There's always going to be really bizarre cases of someone who goes to the doctor and they're like, I'm a giraffe. You know, you have to turn me into a giraffe. There are people now who go to the doctor
Sorry, I'm so deadpan.
I think I could be a giraffe.
Where do you think all of this stuff comes from? Why do you think it's an increase in, I guess, the political narrative, but also just in the prevalence of trans people in general? What do you think has happened? Some people, say social media. Other people say it's acceptance. Like, what's your kind of view on it?
$1 million question. Well, I guess in terms of the desire to be another sex, there's a long history of that. And it was far more skewed towards men and their motivations for wanting to be women. So, you're familiar with obviously the Blanchardian typology, which we can obviously go into if you want to, but I guess from a desire point of view, there's that. And then, you can follow the history, that it's all documented in terms of kind of how this phenomenon has grown over the course of the last century. Like, this has taken a long time to really become so mainstream. So, you start with Magnus Hirschfeld, and, various kind of crazy scientists doing bizarre.
Is this in Weimar, Germany, or is this pre that?
Yeah. There's a few of those early stories, and I'll misquote them if I describe them completely, but there's this Christine Jorgensen one. I think that was one of the first that it was just announced in the newspapers that this military veteran guy had become a woman. And then I think Magnus Hirschfeld was the Lily, is it Lily or something? The one that was in The Danish Girl with Eddie Redmayne.
Yeah.
That's what it's portraying basically. And I think he was the first person to, and the last maybe, but to receive an actual womb transplant to try and turn him into a woman, which obviously he then died from the complications. So I think originally there were a very, very small number of men who would by themselves arrive at the spontaneous feeling that they must be the other gender. And their desire was so strong that even though it was not a cultural craze, they still tried to seek out someone who would help them. So while there are probably lots of other men in history who've had similar thoughts, it just wasn't a thing. It wasn't, society had not imbibed the idea that you could change sex. So most people would kind of live with some sort of dissatisfaction, or perhaps they'd get over it after time. Like we don't really know. But then obviously as time has gone on, you have had a movement in academia with postmodernism that has blurred the idea of what sex actually is and intersex conditions. You've then had the pharmaceutical industry, which has capitalized on people's suffering. You had gay people kind of coming out a little bit more, but still suffering a lot of homophobia. So a way that they could kind of navigate that in the middle would be transition, rather than just pretending to be straight people. Lots of different things. Hey everyone, I hope you are enjoying this interview. And while you're at it, if you're not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button so you can help my channel reach as many people as possible. And go ahead, hit the like button, you want to. And with that said, let's get back into it.
That it's the technology or the zeitgeist or both. That's kind of, because you mentioned those other stories, and there are obviously people who fought to seek it out no matter what. So do you think that the availability of the fact that it is now, quote unquote, a possibility is the fact that people are more inclined to move towards it, because then the desire doesn't have to be so strong that, you'll risk transplanting a womb or something crazy like that?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, with kind of these biopsychosocial phenomena, you can't attribute it down to just people are born this way, or just it's a craze, or just, there's some sort of, during this period, people are afflicted with some sort of specific mental condition that one day won't be a thing anymore. We understand our suffering through the frameworks that are given to us. So there's always going to be really bizarre cases of someone who goes to the doctor and they're like, I'm a giraffe. You have to turn me into a giraffe. There are people now who go to the doctor.
Sorry, I'm so deadpan.
I think I could be a giraffe. there are people now who desperately want a limb amputated, and it's rare, but people don't entertain the idea, at least in, at a broad institutional level and government level. So it kind of stops some of those, very rare radical people in their tracks, because it's just not possible. But when you make something possible, then there's obviously going to be the early adopters. It's just like kind of a business model, the people who just desperately desired that anyway. And when we talk of the autogynephilic type of trans motivation, which is when a man has a sexual response to the thought of himself as a woman, and sometimes can be led to identifying with an alternate version of themselves as a woman. There's a long history of that through centuries of men who've had that desire. So obviously there would have been a small percentage of them who genuinely would try and seek out, their suffering and obsession was so intense that they would try and seek out someone even just to remove their genitals. It was that crazy. But those examples are so rare. Whereas now, because pharmaceutical companies jumped on it, academia validated all the ideas and marketed it as a civil rights movement, all the LGBT charities took it on board and modeled it as gay 2.0. And then the online craze, and then the wokeification of political correctness. It's all been kind of a concoction. So now there are lots of more people who are suffering, and they're understanding their suffering through this framework that's being given to them. Whereas in the past, that may have not been the case. They may have identified with another disorder, or even, got over it after a little while because...
So you think that, So you think that the idea of it is, because the thing I'm hearing more and more is basically that there is these classical transsexual things, but then there is also just a whole host of other mental conditions which are now being pushed towards transgenderism as well. Is that kind of what you think? It's like it's being misdiagnosed and applied? Because if you think about like the explanation of what gender dysphoria is, body dysmorphia can fall under that, depression could fall under that. There's a lot of different things that could be loosely associated with the same idea. So do you think that it's do you think it's a situation where it's a misdiagnosis, or do you think it's a situation where it's exposing more people who have that, I guess with the AGP thing, you would say that paraphilia?
Yeah, it's tricky because when we talk about diagnosis, it comes with it's implied that there are some people who are really transsexual and gender dysphoric, and there are some people who are fake or not really, or something else. And I don't believe that that's true. I don't believe that there's any true trans. I don't believe that gender dysphoria is as clear as we think. I think there is definitely a host of symptoms that you could attribute to someone being very unhappy about their sex. But sometimes the reasons you're unhappy about your sex is entirely due to societal factors and the fact that, you can't express yourself as a gay man the way you want to, and you can't find a partner. You may not really be dysphoric about your penis. And then you have some people who actually are very dysphoric about their body, and they want nothing more than to have breasts and all this stuff. So it all gets kind of mashed together in this gender dysphoria type thing. But I think when you look at the actual reasons and you drill down, you can actually separate these things, because it's the same thing with these autistic young girls or isolated, kind of socially awkward young girls. They might vehemently detest their body and their breasts and their period, and they may kind of then begin to idolize what it's like for men. But that's a very different experience to, an autogynephile having a sexual response, or a gay man suffering homophobia. But I think the way I describe it is there's different reasons someone can become unhappy about their sex. For some people, take away all the ideology and let's pretend trans wasn't a thing, there would be some people who would, if they were honest, say, I wish I was a woman, or I wish I was a man, which would not be very common. But because now it's marketed as, and all the other things I described as kind of a concoction, Now you have men who would have otherwise been kind of, you know, a touch autogynephilic, or, you know, perhaps had a bit of that desire, but they wouldn't have ruminated on it this much because it just wasn't possible, you know? As in, if you know, for example, if I was really short and I desperately wanted to be tall, it's just not possible. So I probably would kind of have a fleeting moment here or there. It sucks to be short, but, you know, there's only so much I can think about that. Now, if there was some brand new technology that could make people tall, then of course you're going to find some people who are desperate to get that, and then you're going to find people who are 6 foot.
There's those horrible things where they break the bones and people do them, but they're very
Yeah.
extreme, right? Where they grow the section in between in their limbs. Have you seen that? They break
No.
their, oh, it's a thing. They break your femur and then they put a little section of bone and it grows slowly and you gain about 2 or 3 inches.
Yeah, that's horrific. This stuff scares me a lot because some people say, "Oh, well, one day it will be possible for a man to have a uterus," and I'm just like, not everything that's possible needs to actually happen.
No, I think it's much, honestly, I think what's much more likely before that is we'll be able to transfer our brain into a different body, because the surgery is quite messy. I think that it's much more likely that we'll get there before we get to where people think we'll get on the other thing. And then it will just become a rich people thing and bodies will just become like, you know, outfits that you wear, and then all this argument will be weird. But that's a few hundred years away at least.
Yeah, I just hope it's one of those things that we say, okay, this is possible, but also no, like kind of stem cell babies and that stuff. I think there are stuff in that's possible that we don't do. But yeah, I guess in summary of what I was saying, there's different reasons why you could become unhappy about your sex. It could be sexual, it could be due to trauma, it could be part of a political movement. But because the craze now exists and it's sold to people as a framework to solve their ideas, you have people who would have otherwise just not really understood their suffering through that way, or dealt with a kind of mild dissatisfaction themselves, like we do with other issues, instead of becoming obsessed with this idea that they need to change sex, you know? And like an example is, take the RuPaul Drag Race guys. Now, obviously, historically, it's just been they're gay men who do drag, and then some of them get, you know, facial work done, lip filler, all of this stuff. And they're very good at makeup and hair, XYZ. In the past, none of them would be trans, none of them would transition. But now you're seeing lots of these guys, after they do the show, actually start identifying as a trans woman. So my theory is, I don't believe that most of them are probably dysphoric. I think a lot of drag queens have mental struggles from growing up gay and also being part of a really intense party scene that doesn't really prioritize mental health. But, you know, their understanding and experience they're having through the concept of trans and gender identity. So some of them are deciding to transition. Maybe that's giving them access to other men. Maybe that's elevating their social status.
But do you think it's also an attention thing? Like, you know, I can just be this person all the time and I get attention on the show and I got attention on social media. The normal me doesn't get any attention. So is it not better to be this, you know, drag persona 24/7?
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. I mean, if you think about, you mentioned kind of true transsexuals. I think the reason we think of some of the classic transsexuals in that term is because in the past, let's say the 80s, 90s, it would have been so rare for someone to do this to themselves that perhaps it was the most desperate and the people who had thought about it most deeply that would end up doing it. And therefore, perhaps we saw a slightly better set of outcomes, even though when you look at the data, it's actually quite poor. I mean, people like Buck, Angel, and Blair White are great, and I'm really glad they're happy, and I wouldn't want to take anything away from them. But obviously, they present an ideal of people who are really happy, and I'm not convinced that that's the case for the majority of people. I think a lot of their problems have not gone away.
Yeah.
But sorry, that was just a tangent. What was your original question there?
No, that makes sense. Obviously, we were talking. I was letting you go because it made a lot of sense. But we were talking about, like, okay, so I guess the next question I was going to ask, which follows into what we were saying, was how much of this kind of gender curiosity is normal though? Because when I was young, there's every single cartoon I can think of has a gender swap episode. It's just like something that was part of the zeitgeist, be it Futurama, Johnny Bravo, literally all of them. And a lot of people reference those as like trans or not as something that they remember. So how much do you think this kind of gender curiosity or just thinking about it once in a while is normal?
Yeah, I mean, so do you mean a gender swap as if, I wake up and I'm in someone else's body for the day?
No, just one of the episodes would usually include some sort of gender swap. So Johnny Bravo did it in one episode. Like people reference these all the time. It's The Simpsons, I'm sure, has had one. Every kind of cartoon at some point has had it where the characters swap gender.
Yeah, I mean, I put I put a clip of The Simpsons in one of my videos where I was talking about autogynephilia because Homer Simpson is looking in the mirror and he's imagining himself having breasts and he's kind of clearly pleased with himself. So yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point to raise. I think it must be very common for every sex to imagine what would life be like as the other sex, because all of us know what it's like to be human, but none of us will ever know what it's like to be the other sex. I don't think it's common for people to think too deeply about what it's like to be, a dog or a dinosaur or something, although you do have some weird sex. But because we all converse with men and women all day, then inevitably you're going to be curious. And also the majority of people are straight. So therefore it would be very advantageous for a man to know what it's like to be a woman and vice versa, because then you get to experience kind of more of their mind and how they walk through the world. I think gay men have maybe slightly less of that curiosity if they're not gender dysphoric, quote unquote, because they're attracting the same sex they are. But I think yeah, to me it makes a lot of sense that people would have that curiosity, and you can see there that there's something to be exploited on.
I guess that's it, isn't it? You're taking something that is relatively normal, because in my childhood all of those cartoons existed, but then you hear trans people reference them as if they were this major moment. And for me, it's honestly just a cartoon I remember, but it's kind of like I feel like it's a normal part of human experience to think about it once in a while, but not to obsess over it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I grew up with all of my close friends being female, as lots of young boys do who will then grow up to be gay. I didn't really identify with other guys or get on with them as friends. So, it was hard because there would be lots of times when it would be a girls only event or girls only activities, and I would kind of be part of the group, but then sometimes not. So I did used to kind of reflect on, oh, what would it be like if I was just one of them and I didn't have this issue? Now, I never went so far as to like being unhappy with my sex and stuff like that, but it was definitely something I thought about. Yeah.
And okay, so I guess the next question would be, what do you think there's a right reason for a person to transition?
Yeah, I mean, this thing is really difficult, isn't it? Because I'm always on my show trying to get to the bottom of, but is this ever a good thing? Is there, or is this one day we're just going to look back on it and it will be a crazy medical scandal? So the way I've come to understand it is, we all make choices and some of them are to our bodies, and sometimes we'll be happy with that and sometimes we won't. But is there a medical need to do this to people? I think no. I think you're providing a physical solution to a mental problem. And I think while some people then get lucky and actually have a good life, for now, at least, that doesn't mean that they won't get cancer, testicular cancer when they're 50 because they've been taking estrogen their whole life. They may be happy right now. But there is the truth is there's no scientific data that actually proves that this is a good treatment on average for this population of people, and it's already a vastly different population of people. So I think there's no good basis for it in in the medical industry. And I do, if I had to predict, I do believe one day it won't be a medical offering, at least in public medicine. However, if I hated my nose, I mean, sometimes I do kind of want a nose job, but that's why I thought of it. So if I despise my nose, but it was functional, then a doctor would not provide me a nose job for medical reasons. But if I wanted to go to some sort of cosmetic clinic where they did plastic surgery and pay for it, then I could. And because I wanted a different nose, I might be happy with the outcome, and then I might go on my way. Now, the nose job won't have solved all my problems in life, but maybe it's made me happy about that one thing. So I sort of see it a bit similar to that. There may be some men who love the idea of having breasts and like, ooh, you know, having this thing that kind of is a fake vagina and whatever. And maybe that will make them really pleased for a while, and maybe it won't make them happy forever. But I don't think that there's a medical need for it, considering the data we have on the quality of life afterwards. And I think the problem is that when a lot of people go to transition now, they do it under the auspices that they're both going to like the physical outcome, but also it's going to solve their mental issues and it's going to solve all their life's problems. And that's why, from a medical context, it's just not what's the word? It's not ethical. Yeah. I think, to do it like that. But then when you move that towards a cosmetic process, that's also imperfect, because I also think that there should be really stringent gatekeeping. And one of the gatekeeping methods is therapy, but then therapy is medicinal. And so many people transitioning are at a stage in their life where they're very fucked up mentally. Like, they're going through so much shit. And even with the medical industry having the little gatekeeping it has, there are loads of people slipping through the cracks who have ruined their lives. So if we make it just if you can pay for it, you know, then it's going to be like, sign this consent form. If you regret it, it's your fault. So I don't know.
I feel like the people who are the happiest with the results tend to be people who treated it kind of like cosmetic surgery. Like, you know, we referenced Angel, and he very much says, I'm a woman who's pretending to be a man. But like, people who have that kind of logical mindset about it, they seem to come out of it the happiest. And there's some weird tattoo artists who have done it, and they're very much just, it's a very much physical thing for them. It doesn't seem like they were trying to fix something inside. So it's about presentation, and I feel like those are the, you know, I don't know if it's still the right reason, but I feel similar in that I think cosmetic reasons might be the only real reason. But it has to be like, but like you said, how would you know if someone's of sound mind to get it done?
Yeah, and I also think that if, like, any situation in which, for example, a man wants breasts and a vagina, he is running away from his sex. He is trying to escape his body.
That bloke who did you see the guy who lost a bet and he's had to have breast implants for the rest of his life now?
I think I might have heard that somewhere, but I've not actually seen any articles on it.
Oh, it's like an old YouTube clip, but it is a thing where he lost a bet, so he had to have boob implants. So there are some people who have it for other reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, right? Because you could say, well, this is just a man who wants cosmetic surgery to have breasts, and he's still a man. And you could say, but why can't we just accept that and then still call them men? But I think the only reason he wants breasts is to escape being male. So I think, yes, people who are probably grounded in their biological reality and see it more as cosmetic, they're more likely to be successful. And if they have, you know, a stable relationship, stable family, kind of good support system, a job. But, you know, Blair White, Book Angel, love them. They're successful. But, you know, it's very clear to me that both of them are running away from their sex. I mean, Blair talks about how, you know, she was abused as a kid, you know, constant homophobic bullying, like the faggy kind of sissy kid. No gay men wanted to date her because she was so feminine. So I think it's difficult, because I don't think anyone would want to alter their body that drastically to mimic the other sex, were they not trying to escape their old sex. Now, maybe there's contexts in which they can acknowledge, well, I'm still this sex, but this is just something I want for myself, and they might be happy. I mean, there's always going to be statistically people who benefit from kind of anything, if you know what I mean. I don't think it's as simple as saying, oh, well, it's like a placebo, because if you do a study on people, there'll always be like 10%, 20% who just feel better. I don't think you can really say that, because you're altering your body so drastically that it's very obvious you've done something. But yeah, I just see it more as like, this is a type of body modification. You have some people who put tattoos all over their body, get piercing in every single orifice everywhere. And maybe some of those people just think it's funny, or they do it for kicks. Maybe there are some of them who thought all of these piercings are going to solve, because if you pierce every single element of your body, like that must be a coping mechanism for something.
Or you're addicted to the pain, maybe. I don't know. I guess with that, it's difficult, because with obsessive cosmetic surgery, it's like a body dysmorphia thing. But with piercings and tattoos, I feel like it might be a pain aspect, because there is and the addiction to the rush, and then you eventually run out of space and you just have your entire body covered in it.
Yeah. And I think the other tricky thing is, it's one thing to get implants or some sort of facial feminization surgery. There are women who get breast implants, there are women who get plastic surgery, and men. But it's another thing to prescribe cross-sex hormones to someone, because those are drugs. So how can you do that in just a clinical setting in a non-clinical setting without doctors?
I don't think you can. I mean, I worry as well that, because it is a new drug that you're introducing to your system, how much of this becomes like an addiction as well to the new thing? Because anything new that's different is going to alter the way you feel, which is going to have a kind of drug response.
Well, I think testosterone in particular is, you can't quit it cold turkey, because you get kind of withdrawal, and it can send women into early menopause. So that is definitely something that is addictive, I think, especially because, I mean, I've seen TikToks of some women, really kind of vulnerable, kind of teenage trans type, who are taking extra testosterone because it's making them feel, really high, kind of, or just really confident. And that's a concern. I think there is some genuine abuse of that stuff going on.